What word best goes with the word Catholic for you? When you think Catholic, what word goes with that? What fills in the blank? Catholic Church? Catholic faith? Catholic tradition? Catholic religion? Catholic rules? Catholic laws? Some of those words probably create a different feeling in you than the others do. Some people put the blank ahead of the word Catholic. Some people will say, I was raised Catholic, which clearly indicates that they don't consider themselves a practicing Catholic now. I was raised Catholic, they'll say. Some say, I'm a recovering Catholic. Have you ever heard that one? That can get our hackles up if we're practicing Catholics, right? If somebody says they're recovering from being Catholic. But I think what all of those words give us is an indication that our relationship with religion is complex. It's a complex thing. In my last parish, there was a coffee shop locally that was run by a religious sect. I would often go there to work on my homilies or to do computer work because it was just a short walk away from the rectory. And I didn't know at first that it was run by a religious sect, but you could tell if you were paying attention that something was a little different. The first indication was the way they dressed. All the same. The men with their hair a certain way, the women with their hair a certain way of dressing. They kind of had a hippie vibe, but if you were paying attention, you could see that there was more to it. There was one family from this sect that ran that location. It was mother and father and 4 kids, and the oldest was a 19-year-old son that often was the waiter for me when I went there. And we developed a cordial relationship. And one day he said, I got an awkward experience that I've got to tell you about with a woman from your church. She yelled at me. And I said, why? And he said, because I didn't call you father. I just called you Scott. And she told me that it was very disrespectful to talk to you that way. He said, but in our religion, we're taught that you can call no one on earth your father. So I'm in kind of a hard position. And so I told him he could just not address me with a name, just say, hello, what can I get for you? But he said, no, I want to do better than that. So then we started having some fun with it. And I said, well, call me boss or call me jefe in Spanish. Or call me señor, but none of those seemed to work. And so then he said, I don't want to say anything offensive here, but we have the same Bible, don't we? Don't we use the same Bible? And I said, yes. And he said, then why do you let people call you father when it says not to? And I told him, we read that exact scripture in our churches every 3 years. And in the same scripture, it says, never go into the church and sit in the seat of honor. And it says, don't wear tassels. And he got more confused. He said, why do you do that then? And I said, I actually do not have a great answer for you about each of those things. I said, but I will say this. I've come to really believe that it pleases God for us to see our religions failing sometimes. I think it pleases God for religion to sometimes let us down so that we never confuse religion with God. So that we're always very clear that God alone is God, and that religion is a beautiful gift to help us get close to God, but only God is God. And nothing short of God will ever measure up to God. We're in the final week of this book that we've been reading together as a parish. A lot of folks have been in small groups reading this together. Others of us have been reading on our own. And in this last section, the author, Matthew Kelly, is suggesting that we figure out how we can have what he calls wholehearted faith. How we can let our faith be wholehearted. Which I think is like saying, how can we make our faith like a really nourishing stew that sticks to our bones and that isn't fragile, that doesn't leave us feeling hungry a little bit later? And I think part of that question is, how can we learn to lean on our faith so that we're not depending on religion to do all the heavy lifting for us? Can we lean on our faith and not put all the pressure on religion? Can we allow the religions of the world to be imperfect? Can we allow our church and all of the churches of all the religions to be not God, to be less than God, so that we never confuse them with God? Can we learn to love our religion and religion in general, even if it's imperfect? If you've been watching, they've been doing renovations on the Cronin high rise. Some of our parishioners live there, and it's been wrapped in scaffolding for weeks now. And I think the scaffolding is actually a very good metaphor for what we're talking about. Because scaffolding is what you put up to build a building. Scaffolding is what allows a building to get built or a tower to get renovated. But it's not the same thing as the building. I'm sure there's some people in the Cronin high rise that are like, oh, that scaffolding is ugly. Or it's ruining my view a little bit. But there's no reason to curse the scaffolding because it's meant to help us get to where we want to go. It's required in order to complete the project. But we don't have to get confused about which part of it is scaffolding and which part of it is the building. And that's how faith and religion maybe work together. That religion is the scaffolding that we've been given to build the tower of faith. And there will come a day in heaven where we don't need religion anymore. But until then, religion is what we have. So what if it pleases God for religion to be just as it is? I would propose that actually Jesus worked hard to make sure that we would know that religion was going to be imperfect. After all, who did he choose to build the church on? You are my rock, he said to Peter, the one we call the first pope. You're my rock. Well, we know Peter. Peter denied Jesus. Peter got angry. Peter lost it. Peter lost his focus plenty. But that didn't disqualify him for Jesus. Jesus didn't need Peter to be perfect. And I think he's inviting us to not need religion to be perfect. After all, the scandals that our church has gone through and that religions of all kinds go through, those are human scandals. We can't pin that on God. We know that's not God. Those are human problems. And the weaknesses in the church are human weaknesses. They're not God's weaknesses. So they help us perhaps to know that parts of our religion are not God, that only God is God. And that's a really important thing to know. Peter can be holy and a saint and the rock, but he's not God. Only God is God. So this week we are being invited to consider if we can forgive our religion for not being God, but allow it to be good enough. Only God is God, so can we allow it to be the scaffolding that helps us get to new heights that we couldn't get to on our own, but to not expect it to do what only God can do. One author has said that doing this kind of work is like rescuing the baby from the bathwater. Right when we're about to let the baby go down the drain, we say, no, let's rescue the baby from the bathwater. There's plenty of bathwater that can go, but not the baby. And that scaffolding on the Cronin high rise is doing some wonderful things for the people who live there. And let's be honest. Are we going to start our own religion that's perfect? Who among us would start it? Who would be the one? We've seen that happen before, right? People say, this religion is too corrupt. I'm going to start a new one. And how does that go? When it's filled with all the same human problems. Because the problems of religion are not God's problems. They're human problems. So let us make a decision to live this faith as it is, with all of its imperfections, and to do it with a spirit of forgiveness and humility, to do it with our whole hearts.